Did I get it right, Zach?
Yep, you got it, Luker.
Zach Luker, who is going to share with us a few more insights about developing portfolios, particularly around UX related work. So we're grateful to have him. Please join me in welcoming Zach to our seminar today.
Thanks, guys. It's great to be with you. And just so that I'm clear, we end at 12:50, right? That's what I should plan for? Perfect. And first off, apologies that I'm not there with you. I really wanted to come on campus. It's been a little while since I've been on BYU campus, but I came down with a little bit of a cold, as you might be able to hear. So apologize that I'm not there, but I think we can still be productive over Zoom. That's been the story of our lives, right? But yeah, kind of what I'm wanting to go over today, kind of a quick agenda. I want to tell you a little bit about me, and I work for Lucid Software. So give you a little bit of context, tell you a little bit about Lucid Software. And then I thought it would be helpful to tell you a little bit about like what life as a UX designer is like in the industry. As I understand it, some of you may go into a UX related field. And then the meat of my presentation will be in portfolios and kind of diving into some of the do's and don'ts, how to really craft a portfolio that will help you get seen and hopefully land a job. And then hopefully we have some time at the end I can answer any questions that you guys have. And we'll go from there. So really quickly about me, this is me and my family. My wife, Emily, my sons, Graham and Leo, they're a lot of fun. They keep us very busy. But yeah, I love to ski. I love to mountain bike. I love board games. And you might not care as much about that. What you might care about is I did graduate from BYU. I was a student 3 years ago or so, 4 years. And just like kind of my quick timeline, while I was at BYU, I went to the mini career fairs and landed my kind of first UX internship at Sling TV. So the career fairs do work. So I got that internship in 2017. I graduated from BYU in 2018. I went back to Sling and worked a little bit full-time there, and then switched over to Lucid at the very beginning of 2019. So I've been at Lucid almost 3 years and really enjoying my time there. Really brief overview on Lucid. If you have heard of a Lucid product, you've probably heard of Lucid Chart. It's for creating like more technical diagrams, process maps, mind mapping, that sort of thing. Lucid Spark is was our newest, but no longer. But we released it last October. It's kind of like in the middle of the pandemic. It's a digital whiteboarding tool, a little bit more simplified for brainstorming, collaboration use cases. I work on the Lucid Spark team. I was a large part of that effort. And then, yes, Lucid Chart does have hilarious videos. If you haven't seen our doggos videos, highly recommend checking those out. And then Lucid Scale is our latest product. It's a tool to like help you visualize like cloud architecture, so you can plug in like your AWS instance and kind of visualize and do some different modeling and things. Lucid's a great company here in Utah. We're up in Sandy and we're always hiring. So if you guys are interested, highly recommend checking Lucid out. But wanted to give you I'm sure you guys have somewhat of an idea of what UX is and what the life of a designer is, but I wanted to dive into this a little bit. I feel like UX is kind of interesting. It's handled a little bit differently in every organization. And like some people think UX designers are graphic designers and they just make things pretty. And some people think UX designers are like front-end engineers and should be writing a lot of code. But I kind of wanted to give like my definition, or like what my life as a designer is like. And a lot of what I do is trying to like understand users' problems and pains. We have a stakeholder, one of our leadership, he calls it like pain hunting. Like UX designers are like hunting for like the worst pain that users experience when using a product. And then, we aim to minimize that pain, right? Solve that pain, solve that problem that they have, which can be a really, really fulfilling thing. And that often takes place like in designing experiences, right? And I like to say designing experience is not just designing features, right? It's not just like, oh, we're going to put this button here, or we're going to add this panel there, but like thinking about a user's journey from end to end, and how do you create this cohesive experience that's going to help them solve the problems or challenges that they face. And as a designer, you kind of like own that design process. Like, and I'll talk a little bit more about that design process, but like you're doing the work to understand the problem in the beginning, and then you're brainstorming solutions, and then mocking up solutions and testing those solutions. Like at Lucid, how our team is kind of structured, there's like one UX, one product manager, and then like 4 or 5 engineers, and together we like solve specific problems. Like we're given kind of like a focus, and you kind of are like that, the owner of that process, and kind of the owner of helping people understand users and the problems they're facing. But yeah, like what that process looks like, um, we kind of have these 3 phases of work is where we primarily focus. Like discovery phase, trying to understand that problem or understand the market. You might be doing interviews, you might be doing paper prototyping, oops, maybe some competitive analysis. Once you have some ideas, entering the validation phase, testing those ideas, maybe with an A/B test or a coded prototype or a clickable prototype. And then based on what you learn here, you might need to go back to discovery and might need to do more interviews, or you might feel confident and be able to move to the execution phase where you're doing the more final designs, maybe doing more testing. And then the feature is kind of handed to engineering and built and launched, and kind of the rest of this process. But any questions so far on what a UX designer is or does?
I had a question.
Yeah.
You were saying that if you go back to the slide before, so you're saying that as the UX designer, you kind of own the process with the engineers. You kind of guide that process. You're in charge of that process, or is there
Mhm.
somebody over you with that?
Well, it kind of depends on, I think, the organization. Lucid gives us a lot of ownership. So like I have like a manager that I can go to for mentorship or guidance, but like I'm the one who like owns like whether or not we need to spin up research to validate this feature
Okay.
that we're building, or if we're confident enough in the design that we're ready to move forward with like the execution and like have the engineers start working on it. So the way that we're kind of structured, the individual designers do have quite a bit of ownership over that process.
So you work with the users directly.
Yeah, we'll work with the users directly.
Okay.
I'm on calls with users almost every week, kind of hearing how they're using our product, running our solutions by them, and then yeah, I feel like UX is kind of like that liaison between the users and the engineering team.
Are your people trying to get a hold of you right now while you're presenting?
Probably. Sorry if you
I
could.
could hear a Slack da 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 or something. So
Yeah, I thought I muted those notifications. I don't know why I'm still hearing those. So hopefully
okay, well,
those
thanks. Yeah.
hopefully those notifications slow down. I apologize.
No worries. Thank you.
You bet. Um, so yeah, I want to dive into portfolios. And the information I have here is definitely specific to UX portfolios. I don't know all of the fields or industries that you guys go into from this major, but I think some of it may be relevant, whether it's a UX portfolio or some other portfolio. But I looked up like a couple definitions, just like what did Google have to say, and I feel like there was some good stuff here of like showcasing your skills and knowledge to get hired. A UX portfolio is bait to get a recruiter interested in you. It contains case studies of design products or projects. My kind of definition, like I feel like a UX portfolio is like it's this visual representation of like what your experience is, what your skills are, and like what your process is. Like from a portfolio, like potential employers should be able to kind of like get inside your head a little bit, like see how you think and like see who you are, and what you're capable of. Like after I look at a candidate's portfolio, I should be able to have a general idea of what they're capable of. I forgot to mention this before, like, why am I qualified to kind of talk about this? So I have been in the industry for a handful of years since graduating, but I'm also involved in hiring and evaluating portfolios and deciding who comes in and gets an interview. So I do have some qualifications there. Hopefully my experience there will prove useful for you guys. But that's kind of my high level definition of a portfolio. But I also think a portfolio is like Bane. This is kind of a cheesy Batman joke here, but no one will probably be able to guess why. It's a little bit of a stretch, but UX portfolio is like Bane because it is a necessary evil. There's that Bane quote. I am the necessary evil. I don't know anyone who really loves creating UX or creating a portfolio. Like, it is quite a bit of work. But I do feel like they're incredibly important. So even though it might not be the most fun thing to do, collecting all of your thinking, collecting all of your work, I really do think it is necessary. When people are trying to hire a UX designer, we want to be able to see what you are capable of, what you have done before. And that's not really, it's hard to do that from a resume. I would say, I don't know, some people might, this is Zach's thought. I don't know if this is everyone's thought, but I think a UX portfolio is weighed more heavily than a resume when evaluating a candidate. Because a lot of the time, like, if someone has like a mediocre resume, but their portfolio is like absolutely stunning, like, I can look past the resume, like I can see their work, I can see into their head how they think, and like have a better idea that, okay, I want them on my team. Whether it's, if it's the other way around, if they have an amazing resume, great experience on paper, but I look at their portfolio and it's kind of lackluster, it's harder to want to go after them or want to hire them. So there really is a lot of importance in the UX in your portfolio. Like, can you communicate what you're capable of? And I think a portfolio is a better medium for designers than a resume. So I wanted to kind of go into like some do's and don'ts. Like, there's lots of thoughts, lots of opinions on how to create a portfolio. But I felt like kind of do's and don'ts were some practical, some things that you can do to improve your portfolios. So first one, do articulate the problem and frequently tie back to that problem. So you'll notice, and throughout this presentation, I've taken some snippets from some portfolios that I found that are a good example of some of these things. But you'll see in this kind of snippet here, the problem statement is like clearly defined. And then throughout the portfolio, like as you go through of what you did, what you learned, tying back to that problem. Like, so like, oh, I learned that, I don't know, X, and because I learned this, I know that this will help me solve, or this alleviates the pain in this way. What I, like, in reviewing portfolios, or like as I'm doing an interview, sometimes designers will start talking about things and kind of go off on a tangent, and it's easy to be like, how is this connected, or why is this important? Why is this related? But if you have a really strong problem statement and tie back to it, it just makes your whole kind of story that you're trying to tell cohesive. And it's clear why you did what you did, or why the learning you found was important. Next one, don't include irrelevant or outdated work. Like, really just show like your best stuff. This is a bad example where this candidate had like a long list of like all the different classes they've taken and all these other products, things that they'd worked on. And a lot of it was irrelevant, and it's just a lot to dig through. Like when people are evaluating your portfolio, they don't always have, tons and tons of time. So I would say quality is much better than quantity when it comes to portfolios. And I've heard this said before, like, this might not be 100% true, but like you're only as good as your worst portfolio piece. Like if you have pieces on there, from 10 years ago that aren't as relevant, not showcasing your current skill, it can be easy for people reviewing your portfolio to kind of latch onto that and say, oh, well, like, why did they make that design decision? Or that doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's easy to remember those bad examples where if you just give them, I think it's okay if you just have like 2 really, really solid case studies or 2 really solid pieces of work on your portfolio. Don't feel like you've got to fill it up with tons of examples. I don't have any examples of my personal portfolio in here, partly because I haven't redone my portfolio since I got hired at Lucid, so it's been like 3 years. But this is one mistake I made. Like on my current portfolio, I think I've got like 8 or 9 pieces on there, and that's probably too many. You really can narrow it down and just like laser focus in on those good examples that you have. Okay, do highlight what you've learned from each step and activity. So I feel like in UX, we have this UX process, and we have like different activities that we do as UX designers, right? Like maybe you say, oh, I did this contextual inquiry, or I did these user interviews, or I created this customer journey map. And what I see a lot of people do is like, it kind of feels like they're checking a box. Like as they're writing through their thing, like, oh, I did a wireframe. Oh, I did a prototype. Oh, I did a user interview. But they're not really saying what they got out of each of those activities. So what you really want to do is say like, okay, I did user interviews, and this is what I walked away with. I walked away with this understanding of users. Or I did this paper prototype, and then I walked away knowing that people didn't understand that they had to click on this plus thing to add a folder. Or like really be articulate and be specific on what you learned from each activity, and you're building rationale. Like as you get to the end of a design or end of a solution, it should be pretty clear why you made each design decision. Like I should be able to see your layout or see how you presented this experience and know like, oh, they did that because they learned this in this activity, or they learned that in that activity. So this example here in this screenshot, like she kind of like highlighted these 3 different layouts that she was considering. This is the one that she went with, and then it's not in here, but like kind of then detailed out like, this is why I went with this decision. Like this one worked the best because of XYZ. And that really strengthens your story. When you're looking at that final design, it's not like there's no question marks of like, oh, why did they choose to do it that way? Like it should be clear from the activities that you've done. Next one here, this one's somewhat related, but like, don't just list a generic UX process. I see quite a few people do this, is like, you find something on Google is like, oh yeah, I empathized, I defined, I ideated, prototype, and tested, and I came up with this. And like, it doesn't really show what you've learned or what you got from each of those steps. Like, I don't want to know like what your generic process is. Like, I want to know how you applied the UX process to a problem. How did you define this in a way that was going to make you successful? Or like, why did you prototype, or what did you learn from prototyping? Like it needs to be like applied in practice, not just a high level flow. Okay, I think I'm maybe halfway through some of these steps. Any questions so far? Any questions I can answer up to this point?
I have another question.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's great.
And then I see a question on the chat. When you're doing this, and how often do you do rapid prototyping, or do you use a Scrum or Agile methods to try to do things quickly, or you just have a different kind of process when you're doing this?
Yeah, so Lucid uses like an agile process. Like we work in 2 week sprints, like or the engineers work in 2 week sprints. The designers don't necessarily follow that same cadence. Um, we will rapid prototype when we're starting to define a solution, and it always depends on the process or on the project. Um, but one of our design leaders, he's like always saying like you should like be going through like multiple iterations a day. Like you should be built like having a new iteration like 8 times a week, or like test it, tweak some things, test it, tweak some things, test it, tweak some things. So like really quickly uh testing, learning, and like improving your design. Um and So rapid prototyping is kind of one of those things that you do to validate a solution. And then like I'd say like the agile scrum, that's kind of like the methodology that we use for like the engineering development teams. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. And then yeah, there was something in the chat. Does it help to list the UX process you used? Yeah, it does help to like list like, yeah, like these are the steps I took. Like this graphic I put here, like, isn't necessarily bad, like, but as long as you apply it to like the specific project that you did. So if you say, okay, I empathize, don't just show me the final solution and say, oh, I empathize to get here. Like say, oh, in order to empathize, I set up some user interviews and I watched people use I gave them a task and I watched them complete the task and I saw how painful it was to do said task. Like tell me how you're empathizing to your specific project. um don't just say, okay, I empathized, or oh, I defined. um any other questions? These questions are great. All right, I will keep going here. So do provide the necessary context. This image isn't super great, but like, tell me what I need to know to kind of understand your project. I see this a lot, like when I do interviews and in portfolios, of like they'll kind of dive right into the problem or solution, and like I don't have all the information I need to understand the problem at hand. So like this example here was like a some sort of like budgeting or investment app. I can't exactly remember. But like if it's a specific field that you're working in, so like, I used to work for Sling TV. Um, I tried to like set the context of like, okay, these, imagine a user is sitting at their home watching TV with the remote in their hand. They're looking for the game, they can't find it. Or telling them a little bit about the industry, like, okay, Sling TV is competing with cable and satellite companies. It's a internet solution rather than having like a cable or satellite ran to your house. Like, if give people context to the industry, give people context to like the users you're working with, like help kind of paint the scene of the this kind of area that you're working in, so that people like have the information that they need to understand the problem and to understand the solution you come up with. Because the projects you work on will be across a wide variety of topics, right? Like maybe it's a complex law product or medical product, or who knows what it might be, electrical car. And you really want to give people that context so that they understand, they're kind of in that headspace to understand your case study or your design project. don't take credit for others' work. Like own up to your contribution. This one's a little bit tricky. So like often when you're working on a project, you might not be the only designer, or you might be working with a product manager that's heavily involved, or especially like in school, right? Like you might have a student project where you're one of 4 designers or one of 4 people working on the project. And sometimes it's unclear like what was your like what is somewhat a candidate's contribution and what was done by the team. Or sometimes there'll be these really flashy graphics or really cool example of something, and then like it comes out in the interview that, oh, I actually didn't do that part, that was Bob who did those, but he was part of our team. And it you want to be honest, and you want to be able to, like, this is really about you and what you're capable of. And if that's like if you have a lot of your team's contribution in here, that starts to become unclear of like, you know, what was done by you and what was done by your team. So like, it's okay to include things that were worked on by other people. But if you do that, like, you need to be clear in saying like, okay, like I contributed in this area. I helped, you know, write the research plan, but Anna conducted the interviews, or whatever it might be. Just be clear in what your contribution is and what your team's contribution is. And I think it does 2 things. One, it shows us, you know, what you're capable of, like, okay, this is their work. But 2, it shows that you can be a team player, right? Like that you're transparent in giving your team credit for what they do. So always a good idea to be clear in what you do and what your team does. Next one here. Do make your portfolio easily scannable. So yeah, I have some examples here, but sometimes I'll open up a portfolio and there's like an image at the top, and then it's like a wall of text. There's like, you know, paragraph after paragraph of information, and it's hard to sift through. It's not as engaging. It's hard to pull out those like nuggets of information. And a lot of the time the people reviewing your portfolio don't have, you know, time to read every single word really thoroughly, right? Like and there's kind of different steps of it. Like a recruiter is going to probably, who isn't like a UX designer, they're probably going to scan your portfolio a little bit more quickly. They're going to kind of, you know, high level overview, go through it, see if you kind of see if there's any red flags, and if not, move on to the next step. So they're going to really kind of scan it. When like the UX designers on the team start reviewing it, they're going to read it in more detail. But I can't say I always read every single word. So you really want to make it easy to understand and like scannable. So like here in some of these examples, it's like, okay, here's insight 1 and kind of this packaged thing. Here's insight 2. This other one, they kind of had an image and then this kind of title and section of like, this was one of the problems that we found. This was another one of the problems that we found. And kind of giving you maybe some of these milestones that you can kind of visualize, kind of see, where if it's just like a wall of text, like even if you have the same information, it's harder to pick out those insights. And you might not, like, even though you have really good thinking, really good findings, they might not be read or might not be found if it is just this big wall of text. So make that easy to scan, make it easy to consume. So we've gone through a couple other of these. Any other questions up to this point?
I have another question.
All right, lots of great questions.
So when you're working on a design or doing the UX or something for a project, is it to help one of your customers use your software and adapt it to their business, or are you just adapting internally your software? I mean, just creating different products.
Yeah, so I think that kind of depends on the company you work for. So Lucid, and I think a lot of companies in the Valley.
Yeah, I
you know,
just meant for Lucid.
For
not-
Lucid. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so we're building features or improvements for our end users. So like for the people who sign up and pay for our product, we're trying to improve the experience for them. And so yeah, we're trying to make it more usable. We're trying to make certain features more discoverable, but there's also a business perspective. And this was something I didn't recognize as much when I was in school, of like, you want to build things that are like high user value, but are also like maybe lower engineering costs, right? Like you don't want to, like, maybe you come up with this really great idea, but it's going to take 3 years to build, right? Like it's not feasible. Like you want to find things that are high value, low cost, and are going to offer the business some strategic value. But usually it's the PMs or the product managers that are fighting a little bit more for like the low cost, the high strategic value, and it's the UX designer's job to kind of like be the advocate for the user and kind of advocate for those high value items, things that are going to improve the experience for like those end users. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And I see
Okay.
Lori's got a question.
Awesome. Oh, I thought I had another chat, but it was another annoying Slack notification. Sorry.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So as a UX designer who, part of your job would be to say to your development team, we want X functionality. Which engineering or development skill, knowledge, or expertise do you need as a UX designer?
That's a great question. I actually came from a little bit more of a technical background. So I should have mentioned this. I graduated from BYU in the information technology department and did their like human computer interaction emphasis. But like I did have some technical background. But that's not 100%. Like you don't have to come from a technical background. There are lots of people who come from English majors or like art or graphic design majors. I think if you have more technical background, that can be marketable. But there are usually systems in place that will help you understand like what's feasible or not. So like my team, we have a meeting every 2 weeks called like a solutioning meeting. And in that solutioning meeting, we'll come and we'll present our designs like, okay, this is what we want to, this is like the functionality that we want. And then and the engineers have an opportunity to kind of be like, oh yeah, like this all makes sense. We can do that. Or kind of raise any flags like, oh, that would be really expensive to build. We probably can't do that. Or we should probably simplify a little bit so it takes a month to build instead of a quarter to build. So there are usually systems in place so that you don't have to have a perfect understanding. You don't need to understand the entire technical side. And to be honest, the longer I've been out of school and more in the design role, I feel like I'm less in the technical weeds and more in the design user facing problems. I feel like I'm a little bit less technical. And I think that's okay. So kind of a long-winded answer, but in summary, a little bit is helpful, but not critical.
Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions?
I guess I have a
Oh,
question.
yes.
What kind of platforms would you recommend like building a portfolio in?
That is a great question. I've seen lots of different ways. The most common I would say is like to have your own website, and maybe it's built in WordPress or Wix, or I know there's tools that that will offer services to help you build that. I've seen a lot of them in Medium lately, like maybe you have like a homepage and they just link off to different like Medium articles that can help you structure things a little bit. I've also seen a couple built like directly in Figma, like or like you have like a link to a prototype and your Figma prototype showcases your portfolio. But so there's a handful of different mediums. I would say it's best to have some sort of link, something that's live rather than like a static PDF, um, or like a file repository. Like I would avoid sending someone a link to a Google Drive with a list of files. Like some sort of a little bit more dynamic live website is generally best. But that's for, I'd say, for the UX industry. I know some other industries, industrial design or different things, have different their portfolios come across in different mediums. So I can't say there's like one silver bullet, like everyone should use this. I'd say that it can come across in lots of different tools. So sorry, that's a little bit of a gray answer.
That's good, thank you.
Yep. All right, we can keep going here. So here's another one. Don't use like buzzword fluff. Like cut to the chase and like tell people like what you're gonna tell people. I feel like sometimes there's like, oh, I want this to look really thorough and long and like I did a lot of work, but like really like cut to the chase of like, what are the things you did? What are the things you learned? Like, how did you think through this problem? And you can cut out some of the fluffy buzzword stuff. There's this example, Taylor Palmer, who used to work for Lucid, posted this on LinkedIn somewhat recently. And it's like, yeah, I have an inquisitive mind with an insatiable appetite for bettering the human experience through divergent thinking. Like that doesn't tell you much, right? Like anyone could probably say that. But where it's like, I'm a UX design student with a passion for learning. I'm seeking a mentorship and collaboration in a summer internship. And so this is a little bit more like job focused, but I think this really applies to portfolios as well. Like, don't just say, I conducted user interviews and captured valuable insights. Like dive into what people said or what you learned. Like don't feel like you need to fluff it up with the catchy trendy buzzwords, but kind of be articulate and tell people like what they need to hear. Do use frameworks to structure your thinking. So a lot of, and this kind of goes back to making it easily scannable. There's lots of like different frameworks in the UX field. This is like say, think, or this one's called a couple of different things, but like think, feel, do, or says think, feel, do, or customer journey maps, or some sort of like framework to kind of structure some of your thinking, or maybe like if you did some synthesis, use some sort of structure to kind of structure your synthesis of the research that you did. But this can kind of help people see into your insights or see your learnings, and it makes it easier to consume and understand rather than just some paragraph of text, right? And it can help you kind of and a lot of these frameworks are kind of designed and built to kind of extract different insights. It will help you kind of have richer thoughts. There's something else in the chat. Oh, looks like that link doesn't work anymore. Sorry that link doesn't work. I shared part of this presentation to a different group and that must have broken since then. Okay, I think this is my last one. Don't be afraid to be yourself. This is actually Dan Ebling. He also graduated from BYU. He works for Lucid now. And his portfolio, his is done all in Figma. There's no website, just a link to a Figma prototype. But he kind of has like emojis thrown in or these different things circled. He even drew on himself. And it just kind of shows some personality and you get kind of a sense for who he is. And I think that's important in a portfolio. You want to kind of show who you are, how you think, and you kind of want to stand out. My like the VP of design at Lucid, his name's John Dilworth. We were looking through, like, we probably looked at 100 intern resumes, and at the end of it, he was like, I wish some people would just like think out of the box a little bit more, like go out there, be a little bit crazy, like don't be afraid to kind of innovate, be creative, like think outside the box, and it can really help you like stand apart, help you get noticed, help you be more memorable. So as you're thinking about how you want to outline your portfolio, how you want to communicate the things that you know, don't be afraid to be yourself and kind of like show off your personality, show off your creativity. And I think that can go a long way. Okay, so that is my presentation, kind of my do's and don'ts. Hopefully that was helpful for you. Hopefully give you some practical things that you can apply to a portfolio, and hopefully you have a little bit better idea of what a UX designer does in the day in the life. But it looks like we've got like seven more minutes here. Any final questions that you guys have? Questions about life as a designer, questions about portfolios, questions about Lucid? Wanted to give you guys some time to ask me anything you'd like.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, with all of the do's and don'ts that you listed, and with all of the portfolios that you've been through, are there any like don'ts that you see more often than others, or any red flags that you would say, make sure you don't do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say this one's pretty big, like keeping like irrelevant work. Like just show me your best work. I'd say this one and this one for the don'ts of like, I don't want to just see a generic process, like anyone can find that on the internet. Like I want to see how you applied it, how you used it to like understand a problem and get to a solution. This is actually probably my number one, and this is maybe my number two.
Thank you.
Do you mind if I add one piece to that as well?
Yeah.
So when I was an undergrad, I actually used to have one of my jobs was to go over to the business school when they had interviewers come, and all day long the interviewers would do practice interviews with people in the business school. And I was running the AV equipment from a different room. So I gotta be an over-the-shoulder person in the room with people without actually being in the room. And I recorded each one. This was back when everything had to be recorded on videotape, right? Or cassette tape. Every single person said, had the same response to the interviewer's question, one of the questions. And I think everybody thought they were being original or giving them information that the interviewer thought was useful. And I recognize this is interviewing, but I think it might apply to portfolios as well. When the interviewer asked, why should this company be interested in you? Why should we hire you? Everyone's response was, because I'm a hard worker. And so if you can avoid, and Zach kind of talked about this a little bit, this is actually a good slide here where, instead of just having a generic process up that everyone uses, just avoid tropes. Like, I'm just going to assume everybody's a hard worker. If I were the interviewer, I would have been so sick. I'm like, tell me why I should hire you, and don't tell me that you're a hard worker. I don't even want to hear it. And so I couldn't believe it. Like, I sat there, and person after person after person, everyone gave the same response to that question. And I think, to Zach's point about being unique and just being yourself in your portfolio, as well as just avoid those tropes that everybody is going to give that same answer, because the whole point is to help yourself stand out. So if it's the same answer everybody else would give, it doesn't do that.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Yeah, like no one's going to say they're not a hard worker, right? And yeah, avoiding that in your portfolio, I think is a fantastic idea. Thanks for that comment. Any other questions you guys have for me? Oh, there's something in chat. Do you have advice on how often to update your UX portfolio? That's a good question. I am a little bit hypocritical in answering this one. Like I said, I haven't really updated my portfolio since I got hired at Lucid, which is almost 3 years ago. I would say ideally, taking a look at it every 6 months to a year, and adding content. As a student, it might be a little bit different. Like as you're taking different classes or doing different internships, like and if you don't have that job that you want yet, like as you make progress in your projects, you might update that more frequently. Now that I have a UX job, I wish what I would have done is updated it once a year, once every 9 months or so, with the projects that I'm working on, because I know that when it comes time to do it, when I'm ready to look for a new job, it will be a lot of work, and you forget things, right? Like you forget the detail. And I've had times where I've had recruiters reach out to me on LinkedIn, like, hey, like we're interested in you in this for this position. Can you send me a portfolio? And I'm always like, I'm kind of happy with my opportunity right now, so I'm not hunting. But sometimes I've thought, oh, it'd be nice to have an updated portfolio that I could send to someone. Maybe it's a better opportunity than the one I'm in. But right now, like, I don't want to share my portfolio from 3 years ago. So every 6 to 12 months, I'd say. All right. Any last questions?
All right, Zach, we are so grateful for your presentation to us today. Thanks so much for spending some time. Students, if you'll thank Zach through your nonverbal or verbal applause. Very much appreciate your time, Zach, and thank you so much for the great information, just super quality. Students, remember again, there is no seminar next week, and we'll adjourn now for getting something to eat, and we'll see you then after the holiday. Thanks again.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you later.
Thank you.